I just recently went to KFC again the other day. I hadn't been there for a few years, and after going back, it reminded me of one of the scariest moments I had as a kid. I'm an adult now, and this took place probably about 20 years ago. I was maybe like 7 or 8, and my family would occasionally get KFC for dinner. It was one of my favorite things that we would get, and I always looked forward to it. Usually, my dad would go and pick it up from the restaurant and bring it home, and then we'd have it in our dining room. One night, I decided to go with my dad for some reason. I'm not really sure why, but it was a Saturday night, and it must have been either the fall or the spring, because I remember that it was sort of cold out, and it was already almost dark at about 6:30 p.m. We went inside, and my dad got in line to order. There was like one person ahead of us who was currently ordering, and as I waited, I began to kind of wander off around the restaurant. I remember that nobody else was sitting down and eating throughout the entire place. I got bored easy and was kind of in my own world, just walking around, looking at what I saw. I noticed that the person who had been ordering in front of my dad left, and my dad was now up to order. I was just looking around the place, and was near the back corner where there was another door. I was looking out the window when I heard the main door in front of the KFC open. I saw a man walk inside, and he went up to my dad as if he was starting to talk to him. Then, the back door that was near me opened. I saw a grown woman walk in. She sort of looked around, and then at me and smiled. She then extended her hand to me to shake it and said hi. I was sort of confused by this, but I shook her hand and then said hi back to her. But in shaking my hand, she didn't let go. She grabbed my wrist and started walking backwards to the door, only about 5 feet away. I was surprised by this, and before I knew it, we were outside. I didn't say anything and was just really confused at first. I remember the woman said something like she just wanted to show me something really quick. She led me right around the corner of the building to a van. It looked older and beat up, and the door was already open. She then put her other arm around me and kind of lifted me into the van without telling me to go inside or anything. At the same time, I saw a man come jogging from the other side of the building. When he got closer, I recognized him to be the same man that had started talking to my dad. He helped the woman get me inside the van, and they slammed the door shut. The man then sprinted around to the driver's door. Around the same time, though, I started to see another guy running around the corner of the building where we were. It was my dad. He was sprinting towards us, and I heard the woman who was in the back seat next to me, still holding onto my wrist, start to scream. She was yelling "go" to the man, but the man driving then turned and said, "No, let him out." My dad reached the van and stood in front of it. I could hear him yelling. The woman ended up opening my door and then shoving me outside. My dad came around and grabbed me as they sped away. I remember my dad pointing out that the van didn't have any license plates on it when they drove off. We then went back inside after that, and my dad called the police and then began yelling at the people working at KFC. Obviously, it wasn't their fault, but he was just angry. The whole time, I didn't really know what to do. I just never expected anything like that to happen. After the police arrived at the KFC, I talked to a few officers and told them everything that happened, including describing the man and woman and their vehicle. Eventually, I was able to go home. We didn't go to that particular KFC for a long time after that. Last year, I went to the KFC drive-thru one night. I was driving home after doing some shopping, and I don't remember the exact time, but it was maybe like 9 p.m. or so. I was craving a chicken sandwich from KFC, so when I saw one close to the stores I had been at, I stopped at it. I went in the drive-thru to order faster, but when I arrived at the menu and rolled my window down, I didn't hear anything at the other end. I waited for about a minute and looked around. The lights were still on, so it looked like they might still be open. However, nobody was saying anything. I asked if anybody was there, but still didn't get a response. I noticed headlights approaching behind me and saw a larger-looking truck pulling into the drive-thru behind me. I decided to look online to see if they were actually open or not. I took out my phone, and for a minute I was looking to find the KFC when I heard the truck behind me honk. I looked and couldn't see who was in the truck due to the bright headlights, but I figured the guy wanted me to hurry up. As I was on my phone, I heard a door open and shut behind me. The next thing I knew, I saw a man approaching my driver's window. I rolled it down, and the guy was angry right away. He had longer hair and a beard, and was yelling at me to hurry up and said I was wasting his time. I told the man that they were closed and nobody had answered the intercom. The man didn't seem to understand me though. and kept going on about how I was wasting everybody's time and how mad he was. He began yelling at me in a threatening way, and it seemed as though he was likely drunk or high or on some sort of drugs. He really wasn't making a whole lot of sense, and I decided to just tell the man that I was sorry and that I was going to leave. I didn't know what he was capable of, and the man then cursed at me and started returning to his truck. I was happy he was gone, and I began to drive away. I figured he could find out for himself that the place was closed and nobody would answer him. But when I drove off, he began following me. He was honking and revving his engine as he drove extremely close to my car. I was concerned because if the man was on drugs, he certainly shouldn't be operating a vehicle. He also was driving a big truck that was much larger than my little car. I drove out onto the road and he followed. I was hoping he would pass me, and a short time after we got past the businesses to a more rural area, he did begin to pass me. But when the man's truck got about even with my car, I saw him roll down his window and start yelling at me again. He then veered his truck towards my car and was starting to run me off the road. I slammed on my brakes and stopped, and the truck kept going and ended up crashing into the ditch. I stopped there on the side of the road and saw the man exit the vehicle and began running towards mine. I sped away after that, and I called the police and reported the whole incident. Looking back, I'm glad the man went into the ditch because he could have caused a serious accident or got somebody hurt. I'm not sure what his problem was or why he was acting that way. I work at KFC. I've been working with the company for about a year now, and this has got to be the scariest thing that's ever happened while working there, let alone my entire lifetime. I was working the late shift on a Thursday night. It was about 9 p.m. I'd been helping my manager on drive-thru with packing orders as we were getting a little bit of a rush in the drive-thru. There hadn't been anybody in the lobby for a while, and no one had come inside for the last hour. As I had finished making a famous bowl and passed it along to my manager to give to the drive-thru cashier, I heard the door to the restaurant open, and it made the noise that it always did when someone was coming in. I walked over to the front counter to greet whoever was there, but I saw no one at first. I turned around and went for a couple of seconds when suddenly I heard a voice call out to me. There was a girl now standing there who hadn't been there a few seconds before, and I had only turned my back for a very short time. I actually thought the girl was very pretty. She was my type and everything. I asked how I could help her, and she ordered a 2-piece with mac and cheese and a drink. She told me that she found me pretty cute, which I was actually kind of taken aback by it. She even told me that I looked good in the red uniform shirt. I laughed while blushing, but I couldn't directly say that I thought she was beautiful, as I had to remain professional. I went to go pack her order, and when I was done packing, I brought it to the front counter and called out to her to tell her order was ready. I waited for a minute and got no response. I called out to her again, but still nothing. I thought maybe she went to go sit at a booth that was a little far back from the kitchen, but when I went there, however, she was nowhere to be seen. I was very confused, but I thought maybe she had just gone to the bathroom or something, so I went back to doing my work. Eventually, about an hour passed. It was time to lock the door to the lobby. I did, and then realized the girl who had walked in there. I looked back at the table, and the food was just sitting in the same place I had left it. I couldn't believe it. I went to knock on the girl's bathroom, as maybe something bad had happened to her, and I was quite worried. Eventually, after a few knocks and calling out a few times, I had gotten no response. I decided to open the door, and when I did, it clearly looked like nobody had been in there the entire time. I then attempted the men's restroom, which she could have gone in as well, but I got the same results. There was absolutely no one in there. I was in complete shock. How was this possible? The pack line wasn't too far from the front counter, and I could hear the entire time someone had come in there. From the time that the girl had come in there to now, I hadn't heard the door open or close once, and no customers had come in after that. I was very creeped out. I didn't know how she could have left, but I had about 2 hours of my shift left. I didn't tell my manager or anyone else what had happened in fear of getting accused of lying. I cleaned the entire lobby, cleaned the front counter area, and whatever other small tasks I had to do before leaving. I usually walk to and from the KFC, as I don't live very far, and it's about a 20-minute walk. I said goodbye to my coworkers for the night and began walking home. About 10 minutes into my walk, I had gotten this overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. I turned back, and my jaw dropped. Standing about 500 feet down the road was the same girl that had been in the KFC. I backed up and turned my head for a second, But when I looked back, she was gone, like she vanished into thin air. I was so scared that I ran the rest of the way home. Once I got to my door, I unlocked it as quick as I could and rushed inside. This was by far the scariest thing that ever happened to me working at KFC and in my life in general. This was only about 3 weeks ago, so it's still very fresh in my mind. I told one of my managers what had happened, and when I described what the girl looks like, and she was in complete shock. She said it sounded like I was describing Kaylee, an employee that I had heard of before. She had passed away a few months before I started working there. I couldn't believe what I was hearing at the same time, and it made me pretty emotional. During a time when I was done with college and wasn't able to find a job right away, I took a job at a 7-Eleven because I needed money. I worked mostly late night and overnight shifts. What I liked about this was that there wasn't many people that came in, and I would have a lot of free time by myself to play on my phone or listen to podcasts. I was always a night owl, but I didn't really like staying up all night when I would have to work those hours. Anyways, I'd been working there for maybe about 2 months, and one night I was working by myself very late. It was probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, but I don't remember the exact time. The location that our 7-Eleven is at is on a road just off the highway, and we're really busy during the day, but not so much at night. We got several customers early on, and for the first few hours, I had quite a bit to do actually. But now, we would get only like one person every 20 minutes or so, and I started to get bored. I noticed in the back corner of the store where we had the soda machine and icy machines, there was a spill on the floor. Seeing as though we didn't have any customers, I decided to go over and mop it up. I left the counter and walked over to the back near the bathrooms where we kept the mop, then over to the corner where the spill was. I saw the spill. Looked like Coca-Cola. Thankfully, the floor hadn't gotten all gross and sticky yet, and the mop was working well. As I was mopping, I suddenly heard the sound of the front door opening and somebody walk inside. Realizing I wasn't at my counter, I rested the mop against the wall and looked over to see who had entered our store. Where I was, you couldn't see the front door, and whoever was in the front door couldn't see me either. I could, however, just see the front counter. I saw somebody standing at the front counter with their back to me. They seemed to be looking around as though they were looking for someone who worked there. Realizing I needed to go back there, I took a couple of steps over to them, and as I did, I noticed them turn and their head went to the side. They hadn't noticed me, but I did see them looking to the side, revealing that they were wearing some sort of mask. It appeared to be a really creepy looking clown mask. I then noticed that he was wearing a dark blue jacket and his right hand was in his pocket. Immediately I got a bad feeling, as if he was up to no good and possibly looking to rob the place. I froze in place, telling myself to stop being scared for no reason and to just go. I thought, what are the odds he's trying to rob the store? It had never happened before. But as I was standing there, I watched the man then go around and behind the counter himself. As a pure reaction to this, I jumped behind the nearest aisle and hid. I could hear the man messing with stuff behind the counter, and it sounded like he was going through the cash register. I figured he was in fact robbing the place, and as I was hiding back there, I decided to call the police. I got up my phone and dialed, but as soon as I heard the 911 operator answer the phone, I suddenly heard the man go quiet from whatever he was doing and say something. Out of fear, I quickly hung up the phone and held my breath. I heard the man shout from behind the counter, asking who was inside and to come out now. He spoke in a loud and demanding tone. I wasn't going to, though. I was way too scared to move. At this point, I just wanted to get out of there. I knew our store was being robbed, but they didn't pay me enough to try to stop this guy. I just wanted to call the police again, but obviously the man could hear me if I did. I heard his footsteps moving out from behind the counter and get a little bit closer to me. But then they stopped, and I didn't hear anything. I was not moving a muscle, and I was being as quiet as I possibly could be. Then, I heard the door to the building open and shut. I guessed that the guy was leaving, because I didn't hear anything else for about a minute after that. Finally, I got up and slowly took a few steps out. I still heard nothing, and knew this had to mean that the guy was gone. I walked over to the counter to examine what exactly the man had done, and how much he had took. When I got there, though, I passed by the front of the counter where I could see clearly outside. I saw that the man was standing right in front of the door looking inside with his creepy clown mask still on. I jumped back when I saw this, and the man started to walk inside. I ran back towards the end of the store where I had hid before, and I heard the man come in and shout at me to come out and stop hiding like a baby. His footsteps were fast approaching mine, and I knew I probably wouldn't be able to hide from him this time. I was ducking down and quietly moving through aisles to try to hide from the man. This continued for probably a minute, and I knew I couldn't keep this up for much longer. I could hear where the man was, but suddenly I heard the man yell a curse word and then run back to the front and leave the building again. I was confused, but this time decided to stay hiding. Out of curiosity though, I took a quick peek outside. This time I saw a police car in the parking lot, and it turned its flashing lights on as I saw another car starting to drive away. I stayed hidden until I saw the police stopping the man, and I knew it was safe. I guess my call to the police had gone through, even though I hadn't been able to speak with them. Luckily the man was caught, and after this night I decided I didn't want to work overnights again. I still worked there for another few months, even working late shifts, but didn't have to work by myself again. This happened roughly 4 years ago. At the time, my friend Brandon took a trip out of town, and I had made the agreement to pick him up from the airport when he returned. I had drove him to the airport after all, and we were good friends, going all the way back to high school. When I got to the airport, his flight had gotten delayed by an hour, and it ended up being a pretty late night. Eventually, he finally did arrive, and I gave him a ride home. I wouldn't do this for probably any other person than Brandon. Plus, he paid me some cash, so it wasn't too bad. When I dropped him off at his place, I started driving back to mine, but quickly saw how I was low on gas. I pulled into the next gas station on the side of the road, which was a 7-Eleven. My experience at 7-Elevens were always good. In fact, it was my favorite gas station and convenience store. I stopped at the pump and prepaid. As I was filling my car's tank with gas, I realized that I really had to use the restroom. So when I was done fueling, I walked into the store. As I walked inside, things seemed quiet. After all, no other cars had been at the pumps, and I barely saw someone working behind the counter. I walked straight towards the back corner of the store where they had the small bathroom. I did my business and began washing my hands. I wasn't even in the bathroom for more than probably 30 seconds total. Suddenly, all the power in the store went out and things were pitch black. This was really strange because it hadn't been raining or storming or anything like that. I finished washing my hands and reached into my pocket to pull out my phone. But when I did, my phone wasn't there. I quickly realized that my phone had to still be in my car. It must have fallen out of my pocket, which is something that happened quite a bit. I really couldn't see anything at all, so I felt my way over to the door and left the bathroom. Once outside, into the 7-Eleven, everything was still dark, except now I could just see a tiny bit more from the windows on the far end of the store. Everything was silent. I began trying to walk to the front of the store without hitting anything. As I was slowly walking, I heard footsteps from the next aisle over, about 20 feet away. I said out loud something about the power being out, trying to make conversation with the person. But whoever was there didn't say anything back to me. I already felt a little creeped out from being in the dark late at night, but now with a person in there who wasn't talking to me just made it a little weirder. I kept moving and eventually found the front counter. I looked over it and could see a little bit over due to the moonlight shining through the window next to it. It appeared as though nobody was behind the counter at all. In fact, I said hi and didn't get a response. After this, I went back and started towards the front door. I could actually see it and went a couple of steps over to it when suddenly I felt somebody grab my right arm and yank me back. I fell to the ground after losing my balance. Then, I felt myself start to be dragged backwards. It was terrifying and I was desperate. I rolled over a little and then swung my body around, and as I did, kicked as hard as I could to whoever had me. I definitely hit them because I felt solid contact, but again, couldn't see anything. I was let free momentarily and got up to run outside. Due to it being so dark though, I ran into some type of display that they had at the front of the store. I heard whoever was running behind me close in, and they reached me once again. My arm was grabbed once more, but this time, I didn't allow it to pull me back or down to the ground. I kicked backwards and felt myself hit whoever's leg was there. I heard a man's voice yell a little bit, And this time, I was able to get away again and make it all the way outside the door. I got out. I ran to my car, seeing all the lights outside to the gas station were off as well. When I finally made it back to my car, I didn't see the man exit the store. I still got inside as fast as I could though, locked my door, and started my engine. As I began to drive away, I felt somebody grab my back passenger side door handle and try to open it, and then heard a loud bang against my back door. This caused me to hit the gas even harder than I already was, and I sped away from there. I was able to make it back home all right, but I was pretty shook up for the rest of the day. I haven't gone back to that 7-Eleven since then, but I have drove by it several times. I always wonder what exactly was going on inside there. This happened back when I was like 16 and in high school. At the time, my older sister had just graduated high school and had been accepted into several different colleges. We lived up north, and she was looking to go to school in the south. Because of this, my parents, sister, and me all made a road trip down south to visit schools. We saw several schools the first few days, and were going to visit the University of Oklahoma the next day. I remember that it was a late night of driving, and we had been up for quite a while. We were maybe an hour or two away from our hotel, when I heard my dad say we were almost out of gas. We had an SUV, and at this moment, my parents were in the front seat, my sister was sleeping in the middle row, and I was in the back row seats. My dad pulled off the busy road and onto a quieter one. As we drove down the road into a seemingly small town, I remember just thinking that the town seemed sketchy. Maybe it was because it was really late at night, or maybe it was because of how everything seemed a little old and run down, but I just felt a little bit creeped out. We pulled into the gas station, and as we did, my dad looked to see if anybody else was awake. I saw that my mom was sleeping as well, and my dad asked me to run inside the 7-Eleven we were now at and get him a coffee. I said sure, and left the car and walked up to the store. As I was walking there, it was very quiet, and just 2 other cars were in the parking lot. I entered the 7-Eleven and went to where I guessed the coffee would be. Walking inside, everything was eerily quiet. I was able to find the coffee and made a cup for my dad. As I was finishing up, I heard footsteps coming near me. I looked over and saw a man coming around the corner of one of the aisles, walking slowly towards me. The man was short and wore sunglasses, a black jacket, and I could see he had a longer beard. He was looking right at me as he was walking. I thought maybe he wanted to get a coffee and I was in his way, so I started walking in another direction. When I did, I noticed the man stopped near the coffee, but he didn't take any. Instead, he seemed to just stare at me, not taking his eyes off me wherever I was. I was hungry myself and thought the guy was just a little weird, but that's all. I tried to shake my feeling of being creeped out and went down to the snack aisle to see what they had. But not long after this, I was looking at some licorice and I heard some noise at the end of the aisle. I saw the man once again just standing there, leaning into the aisle and staring at me. I decided at this point that the man was a complete creep, and I grabbed a snack and headed towards the counter. I wanted to just get out of there. I checked out, buying a snack, some water, and my dad's coffee. As I was paying, I casually turned around and saw the same guy staring at me again. It didn't surprise me, and once I had checked out, I quickly walked out of the 7-Eleven and back to our SUV at the other side of the parking lot. When I got there, I saw my dad had finished getting gas and was sitting in the front seat of the SUV looking at his phone. When I had almost reached our car, I looked behind us. There was a bit of grass next to the parking lot to the 7-Eleven, and I saw some random guy also wearing sunglasses oddly, walking towards us. I then looked over to the 7-Eleven and saw the guy that had been watching me walking past one of the cars in the parking lot, going straight for ours. I quickly got inside our car, handed my dad his coffee, and then carefully went to my spot in the back seat without waking up my sister. Now that I was in the back seat, I felt safer, but saw that my dad was still on his phone, not really paying attention to what was going on outside. He didn't seem to be in a quick hurry to leave, and I looked out the windows and now saw 2 more random guys in sunglasses walking towards us. The same guy from the gas station was there as well, and he was now just about 20 feet away. There was 4 people, all walking towards us, and I now yelled to my dad to leave because there were people coming to us. My dad looked around, confused. Luckily, our engine was already running, and once my dad realized what was going on, he saw it just in time when the men had almost reached us. My dad sped out of there and back onto the road, and quickly made it back onto the freeway where we had been before. I have no idea who those guys were or what they wanted, but they sure were suspicious. I'm glad we got away before they reached us. This happened last year when I went to a McDonald's in California. I was hungry and stopped to get a Big Mac and fries. It was about 9 o'clock at night, and the place was surprisingly quiet. When I entered the McDonald's, I saw that it had an electronic touchscreen where you could place an order, so I walked over to one and tapped it to start. I began looking through the menu for the items that I wanted. I got them and looked around for a minute or two to see if there was anything else that I wanted. All of a sudden, the screen went black for a second, and then came back. When it came back, there was a line on the screen as if it was damaged or cracked. I thought this was strange, but overall, it seemed to still be working. I continued, until only a few seconds later, it went black again. This time, a message in creepy font appeared on the screen. It said, "You're in trouble." I was totally freaked out, and a sudden bad feeling came over me. The screen once again went black, and then returned to its normal state. I didn't really care to keep ordering, and decided to just cancel my order and leave. I got food somewhere else that night, but a few weeks later, I found myself in the same area, but this time it was during the day. I was feeling brave, and I went back to the same McDonald's location, sort of out of curiosity. I walked inside, but noticed right away that the touchscreens for ordering were no longer there. I then walked to the counter where someone asked me if I would like to order. I asked the person working behind the counter what happened to the touchscreen ordering. The man working told me that they did not have it at this location. I told him I had been there a few weeks earlier, and I had used it. The man responded by saying that they had never had touchscreens at this location. I couldn't believe it. I knew for a fact this was the same location that I had been to. I left wondering what exactly had happened the last time I had been there. I'm a female, and I worked at McDonald's during my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college. This story took place my first year working there, only a few days onto the job. It was my first job I ever had, and I remember one time I was working on a busy weeknight. When things finally got quiet, I was asked to go mop the floors. I mopped around the front of the restaurant and then made my way to the back. When I got towards the back and was almost done, I noticed there was one man who was sitting in the back corner of the restaurant. As I mopped sort of near him, he said hi to me. I said hi, and the man then asked me what time I got off of work that night. I told the man I was getting off pretty soon, and then went back to mopping. He asked me what I was doing after work, and I responded that I was going to my friend's house, which happened to be a lie, but this guy was kind of creeping me out, so I made something up. I could feel the man just watching me as I did, and he was just constantly watching me for several minutes after that. It was really starting to creep me out. I was finally done mopping, and shortly after that I could go home. I left the restaurant and noticed that the man was still sitting in the corner as I did. I was relieved that he didn't try to follow me out or anything like that. I went home and got ready for bed as it was a school night and about 10 p.m. I got into bed and started watching some shows on the TV in my bedroom. I would say about an hour or so later, I was beginning to get really sleepy and turned off my light. When my light got turned off, it revealed that on the other side of my bedroom window, there was a shadow. I had a shade covering the window, but if it was dark out, you could sort of see shadows on the other side of it. Usually, there was the shadow of a tree that was on the side of the window, and a bush on the other one. But now, there was a large shadow right smack in the middle, and it appeared to be a person. I got a bad feeling immediately, and slowly pushed the shades down a little bit. All I needed was about 1 inch of space to see that there was a man right outside of my window. I jumped back and screamed as loud as I could. I could see the shadow moving, and a couple of seconds later my parents came running into the room. I was freaking out, but once my parents understood, my dad ran outside. Unfortunately, the man was long gone by the time he got out there,
and he didn't see any sign of him. When he came back inside, my mom had already called the police, and I told them all about the creepy guy at McDonald's. After the police came and we spoke with them, we went to the McDonald's the next day. Luckily, I never saw the man again. I almost quit McDonald's after that, but decided to stick with it and worked there for 2 years. That remains the scariest story I have from my time working there.
When I was in college, I worked at McDonald's during the summer. One day, I was working on a Saturday, and I was behind the counter taking people's orders. It was going pretty well for a weekend, until a man came up and asked for 2 Big Macs. I put in the order, he paid, and I gave him his receipt. I then helped the next person in line. About a minute later, he came back up and said he was charged for 2 Big Macs, but he only wanted 1. I told him he ordered 2, because I know I heard him say 2 Big Macs. He got angry when I said that, and said, "Don't put words in my mouth, I know what I said." "I'm sorry, sir, I wasn't trying to," I said. He then told me not to get smart with him. I could tell he was a short-tempered man. I apologized again, and offered to give him money back for a Big Mac and only give him the 1, but he said he didn't want that anymore. He then started saying that I should be fired. I told him to calm down, but that didn't work. He started raising his voice, and everybody in the restaurant was beginning to notice. One of my coworkers, Jack, came up and started talking to the man. After a brief conversation with Jack, he said he didn't want anything and he just wanted to leave. We gave him his money, and I thought the situation was over. That is, until he leaned in over the counter and said to me, "When you get off, I'll be waiting for you." I didn't know whether to take this as a joke or not, but clearly the man had issues if he was going to make a scene over an extra Big Mac. I didn't say anything, and he turned and walked out. I wasn't too concerned with this threat at all, because I was only an hour into my 8-hour shift. I knew there's no way a man was going to wait around that long, and I didn't think he would actually do that at all. I worked the rest of my shift, which went by relatively well. In fact, by the time I was done, I had forgotten all about the incident. It was 10 p.m. when I was off, so I got my things and headed out to my car. As I approached my car, I saw a car at the other end of the parking lot's doors swing open. Sure enough, out walked the man from earlier. I couldn't believe he actually waited for me. I sprinted for my car and he chased after me. I almost made it to my door when he grabbed my arm. He started to pull me away from my car, and that's when I screamed like a little girl. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my pepper spray and sprayed it everywhere. Eventually it got his face in the struggle, and he let go of me and ran away. I accidentally sprayed myself in the face as well, but I was able to get into my car and lock the door with my eyes burning. It didn't get me too bad, and I was able to regain my composure after a couple minutes. Unfortunately, the man got away, but I just feel lucky that he didn't hurt me. It still blows my mind to think that he waited around 7 hours to confront me.
Our official merch store is finally here. If you want to support more of our channel, check out our merch shop. The link is in the description down below. See you on the next video.
This happened to me last year. I was hungry after a late night shift at work. It was past midnight, so I knew I didn't have many options. I saw a McDonald's and pulled off the highway to go there. McDonald's hours vary depending on the location, so I was hoping they would be open. However, the lights were fairly dim, so I wasn't quite sure. I decided to pull into the drive-thru to see. When I pulled up to the speaker, I heard a voice say, "Hi, welcome to McDonald's, what can I get you today?" I said I would have the number 9, and that was all. They said sure and to pull up to the first window. So I pulled my car around. However, when I reached the window, nobody came to it. I saw the kitchen lights appeared to be all dimmed as if they were closed. I waited there for a couple minutes. I knew I was the only customer, so I didn't know what was taking them so long. After another minute went by, I didn't see any movement at all. I took out my phone and searched McDonald's on Google Maps.
The location came up, and when I looked, it said it was closed. I was confused and kept staring at my screen, wondering if this was a mistake. Just then, I saw somebody finally appear at the window out of the corner of my eye. It was a man in all black with a hood covering most of his face. As soon as I turned my head, he ducked down. I drove off as fast as I could and went straight home. I don't know who that was or what happened, but I do know I won't go back to that McDonald's.
Years ago, I worked at Burger King. It was a job that I had during my college years when I was usually broke. I drove a really beat-up old car, so it was a job that I needed to pay my bills. I worked a lot of late shifts where we closed. I would sometimes take some food and eat it after I was done with work to save money. One night, I worked another closing shift, and after cleaning up and closing the place, the few of us employees left and got to our cars in the parking lot. The rest of them drove off, but I stayed in my car eating because of how hungry I was at the moment. It was a hot night and stuffy in my car, so I decided to start it up and turn the AC on, but when I tried, it wouldn't start. This would happen to me occasionally because of how old my car was. I really needed a new one, but I couldn't afford it quite yet. I stopped trying to start my car and rolled down my window instead to get a breeze. I thought about maybe starting it again, but I called my dad and told him just in case. Thankfully, we didn't live too far away, and he could give me a ride home if I needed it. I sat there in the parking lot, continuing to eat and wait for my dad to get there. I had backed into the parking space that I was in, which was the side parking lot of the Burger King next to a large woods. As I was sitting there, I started to hear the noise of something in the woods. I looked, but saw nothing, and I guessed it was just the wind. But suddenly, I heard something hit the back of my car. I couldn't tell what it was, but it sounded like a pebble or maybe a stick. Something then flew over my car past it, which looked like some sort of rock. I looked behind me, but saw nothing other than the thick woods and darkness. Then something else hit my car. I looked behind me once again. This time, I saw a man from behind a tree. I saw him throw something else at me. He leaned out and fired what appeared to be a rock. I was leaning out the window, and this one went right by my head. It was thrown so hard that I saw it go past the Burger King parking lot and hit the side of the restaurant. I could now see that it was in fact a large rock, and I heard some noises in the woods as if the man was saying something. He sounded angry, but I couldn't make out any of the words. I looked in my mirror. I saw the man take a step out from the woods and start to walk towards my car. I was desperate and scrambled to start my car again, hoping that this time it would work. Luckily for me, this time the car just barely started up. As soon as it did, I sped out of the parking lot and left. I was able to get away and called my dad, telling him not to go to Burger King anymore. The next day, I learned that the windows of the Burger King had been broken and we were closed for a whole week while they fixed it. I guess whoever was in the woods was throwing rocks and went and broke the windows after I left. I'm just glad that they didn't hit me. This story is the strangest thing to ever happen to me. It was last year, and I was about an hour away from my house where I lived, and on my way home. I was hungry, and it was nighttime. I hadn't had dinner yet, and saw a Burger King, so I stopped off for some food. I parked in the parking lot and went inside. When I got inside, the place seemed sort of quiet, but I did see a few people eating inside, and one person up by the counter. I walked over, and somebody took my order. They told me it would be a little while, so I took a step back and waited. I decided while I was waiting to go use the bathroom, and I walked down the hall. I got inside the bathroom and was in there for maybe a minute total. I took my time washing my hands, and once I left the bathroom and walked back out, I noticed that the light in the hallway was now off. Then I got to the main part of the restaurant, and saw that all of those lights were off as well. I walked over to the counter. Everything seemed to be off, and nobody was back there. I guess maybe they closed soon, but I had still placed my order, and nobody else that had been in there before was there. I walked all around the whole restaurant, and every light was off, and nobody else was inside at all. There was no sounds coming from the kitchen area, and and I looked back around and couldn't see anybody. I then walked out of the restaurant. My car was the only car in the parking lot now, too. I had no idea what was going on, and I just drove away, feeling creeped out. I still have no way of explaining it, and every time I've told the story to other people, they don't believe me. Some people think the employees were playing a joke on me and turned all the lights off and hid or something like that. Maybe that's true, but I don't know how they would do it all so fast. Either way, it's very strange. Me and my boyfriend were on a road trip to visit some national parks and stopped at a Burger King pretty late at night. My boyfriend and I went in, and he went to the bathroom while I ordered food for us. The old woman at the counter took my order, but I got a weird vibe from her. I wasn't too concerned though, because most nights fast food workers seem creepy for some reason in my experiences. After I ordered, I waited for my boyfriend to come back, but he didn't, and I don't know why I thought something was wrong. I got the food and was still waiting, so I went to the men's bathroom. As I was walking down the little hallway, I saw light coming out of the bottom of the bathroom door. I knocked to make sure he was okay, but when I did, there was no response. Then the door suddenly opened and my boyfriend walked out. I asked him why he didn't answer me, but he just walked past me with a glassy look over his eyes. I saw he had something in his hand and sped up to get in front of him to ask what his problem was. When I turned the corner, I saw him looking at the old woman that was working, and they had this look on their faces, but I didn't hear them talking at all. When I got over there, I saw he had a piece of a broken mirror in his hand, and all of a sudden he rushed towards me. I didn't know what was happening, so I grabbed his hand and I managed to knock the shard out of it. I hit the side of his head lightly because he scared me with how he was acting. Once I did, he seemed to wake up almost out of a weird state and asked what happened. I looked over at the employee and she rushed to the back of the kitchen and out of sight. Then I walked to the bathroom to see what happened when he was in there. As I opened the door, I saw an old box TV in the bathroom with a weird video playing. It had some weird shapes on the screen. I left the bathroom and told my boyfriend we should leave now. As we drove away, I explained how he acted weird when he came out of the bathroom, and it seemed like he was going to hurt me with the mirror piece in his hand. He didn't remember leaving the bathroom, so we pieced together that the woman worker had something to do with the weird trance he got into. We still don't know why the woman ran to the back of the Burger King, or if she had something to do with why there was a weird video playing in the bathroom. But the rest of the drive for that night, we were paranoid of the woman following us, or what would have happened if my boyfriend didn't wake up from what happened to him.
I worked as a regular pizza delivery driver during my later years of high school. Because of school, I'd always work the night shifts on Friday and Saturday. It was a pretty laid-back job, and for the most part, I'd just be driving or standing in the shop taking orders on the phone. A couple of my friends worked there too, so I always had someone to talk to. Anyways, it was Friday night, and I'd just gotten back from my last break. The place closes at 1 a.m., so we usually stop accepting orders around 12, as we still have to clean and everything before we leave. It was 11:30, but I figured I'd get a head start on the cleaning just to pass the time. Me and my other two friends were the only ones working that night, and one was finishing up a delivery and the other just went on break after I got back. A couple minutes into cleaning, the phone started ringing, so I picked it up and asked how I could help them. There was an older man on the line, and he asked if we were still open for deliveries. I told him yeah, but we aren't taking any large orders. They said that was okay, and asked for a regular pizza and gave me the address to deliver it to. About 15 minutes later, the pizza was ready and I boxed it up and got in my car. The address was a little more than 10 minutes away, and I was probably halfway there when I pulled up behind another car stopped at a stop sign on an empty road. I waited for a few seconds, looking around to see why he was stopped for so long. Then I honked my horn gently, assuming that he'd just fallen asleep or something. The car still didn't move, so I started to pull around him, but of course just as I did that, he pressed on the gas and jolted forward down the road. I was a little bit annoyed, but I figured it was just some guy being a dick for fun, so I continued down the road. But a couple minutes later, I passed that same car pulled over on the side of the road with its headlights off. I got a really uncomfortable feeling passing them, like something didn't feel right about it. I checked my mirrors for the rest of the way to the house to make sure he wasn't trying to follow me. Finally, I turned down the address's long driveway that went between a forest of trees. I pulled up to the front of the house and put the car in park. Then I made sure I had everything and went up and knocked on the door. I waited a minute or two, and then an old lady answered and asked me what I was doing. I told her I was delivering a pizza here and recited the address to her that I was given. She said that nobody here ordered a pizza, and I could tell she felt bad for me. I just thanked her and went back to my car. This wasn't the most uncommon thing to happen, as some people would do it as a prank or just give the wrong address on accident. I figured I'd get out of the lady's driveway, then call my friend to have them call the number back and confirm the address. So I started making my way out of the driveway. But as I was making my way down, bright headlights blinded my view from ahead of me. It was so bright, I knew it had to be a car coming towards me, so I quickly pressed on the brakes. I waited for the car to turn off the lights or turn their car around, but after waiting for a little bit, I figured they weren't going to move. I wasn't sure exactly what to do, as I could barely see and I knew the driveway was thin, so there was no way I could get around them. I decided to just wait and see what they do first, as I didn't really have any other options. A whole minute went by, of both of us just sitting there, before they turned their lights completely off. I waited for my eyes to readjust to the darkness, then looked ahead to see where their car was, but I couldn't see it. I put the car back in drive and slowly began making my way down, being cautious in case the other car started coming down the driveway again. A few seconds later, I see the car with all its headlights off parked in the middle of the path. I recognized it as the same one that was parked at the stop sign. I guess he had followed me without me noticing. I couldn't see through the windows in the dark, so as I sat there, I started to get pretty anxious and worried that there could be multiple people in there with bad intentions. Then the front driver door opened, and a man got out and began making his way towards me. Halfway to my car, he stopped and began waving at me as if he wanted me to pull up next to him. At this point, I'd be lying if I didn't say that I was really starting to freak out. I tried my best to pretend to be calm though, and rolled the car next to him. To my surprise, when I pulled up, he didn't say anything to me. He didn't even look at me, as he started walking around my car and eventually stopped right behind me by the trunk of my car. I looked in my rearview mirror, trying to figure out what he was doing and why he was just standing there. A few moments go by as I'm looking at this man, when I suddenly come to a realization and turn my head around to the front. The other 3 doors of the car swing open and 3 more men start sprinting towards my car. My adrenaline started pumping, and I stomped on the gas, flooring it and almost hitting one of the men as I turned my car off the driveway. I swerve around their car, nearly hitting several trees before making it back onto the path and eventually out onto the main road. There was nobody else on the road at this time, so I could clearly see in my mirror when the car pulled out onto the road and started making its way towards me. I figured they weren't going to stop unless I could get somewhere that wasn't so isolated. But after 30 seconds, the men turned down a side road. I made it back to work and immediately told my friends what happened. They both convinced me to call the police to at least report it, even though I wasn't able to give much helpful information. An officer came down, and I gave an official statement on the incident, and then they left just before we closed. I was surprised to get a call the next day saying that 3 of the men had been arrested after attempting to rob another car later that night in the same exact driveway that I was in. The men were caught when the lady called the police after having 2 more people try and deliver food to her that she didn't order. I guess they were using that driveway to lure delivery drivers in and rob them on the way out, since it was a narrow, isolated driveway surrounded by forest. Unfortunately though, the 4th man was able to run through the trees and make it out, and I never received any updates on him in the following days, so I'm not sure if he was ever found. The old lady said though that she was unaware and had never seen them in the driveway before that night. It's pretty crazy that this happened to me, but I'm also proud of myself for how quickly I reacted and how I was able to make it out unharmed. It definitely made my job more stressful though, and soon after I was able to change my shifts to only working during the day on the weekends. I really hope that last guy got caught though, because who knows how many more people could be in those horrifying situations due to his escape. I worked as a food delivery driver during my first few years of college. Mainly, I would drive for DoorDash or Uber Eats. I didn't like making small talk with strangers and didn't want random people in my car, so I preferred delivering food over being a normal Uber driver. I did this for over a year with pretty much no issues, aside from the occasional customer mad that the restaurant messed up their order. Anyways, it was late Wednesday night, and I didn't have any classes in the morning, so I decided to make an extra few bucks and deliver for a little bit. I did 4 or 5 quick orders, and ended up about 20 minutes from my dorm. It was about 1 a.m. now, and I figured I should probably end it there and head back. The way the delivery apps work is pretty much you just drive around and wait for a random order to pop up, and then it'll give you an estimate of how much you'll make and how far it is. Then you either accept or decline it. On my way back, I left the app running just in case there was a really quick delivery nearby. I got a few requests, but they were a bit too far and didn't seem worth it to me. But then another one popped up just as I was pulling into my dorm. It was about 12 miles away, but the payout was really big. I'd never seen anyone offer that much money before. I gave it some thought, as it was pretty far, but it was too much money to pass up. I accepted the offer and started the directions to the restaurant. A few minutes later, I arrived and pulled up their order so I could make sure I picked up the right stuff. As I walked through the doors, I noticed the customer had only ordered 2 items, and the total was only over $6. This was really unusual, as typically the high-paying orders are because of large deliveries of expensive food. This meant that they were just giving me a really big tip. I got the food and went back to the car. During the drive there, I was really just trying to understand why they would give such a big tip for such a small order. It was a little weird, but honestly I just came to the conclusion that it was either just a mistake or they were trying to be kind. Although 12 miles wasn't too far from my campus, I had actually never been to this area. It was really nice, with mostly gated off neighborhood communities and huge houses. Luckily, their house wasn't gated, and I was able to just pull into the neighborhood. I looked at the homes as I passed by, and realized that the tip money made a lot more sense now. The street was long though, and I was just a couple minutes from the house when the customer sent me a text through the app. They told me to make sure I delivered the food to the right address when I pulled up. I figured maybe the map showed his neighbor's house or something, so when I arrived, I sent him a text with a description of the house and asked if that was the right one. He replied no, and I waited for a little bit, expecting him to describe his house for me, but he never did. I sent him another text describing his neighbor's house, to which he replied no again. I was starting to get pretty annoyed with this guy, and tried calling him instead, but he refused the answer. He would ring a few times, and then he'd decline the call. I looked at the address again, and then copy and pasted it into Google to try and look it up there. Doing this, I actually noticed that the number for the address wasn't a regular number. It had a subset of numbers on it. I'd never seen this before, and wasn't even sure what it meant, so I searched the address on Google and looked at the results. When I zoomed in on the map, I saw that the address actually pointed to a spot right in between the two houses. Zooming in further, it looked like there was a really small garage, or maybe even a shed. It was barely visible. I looked up from my phone and moved my eyes to between the two houses, and sure enough, there was a small garage-like structure. It was just a few feet from the main house that my delivery app brought me to. I honestly wasn't sure what to expect, or why someone would even live there, but I already came this far, so I wasn't about to walk away now. So I got out and started heading over. As I walked up the driveway, I could clearly see what the place was. It was pretty much just a large storage garage, probably meant for keeping an old car or something. I didn't see any normal door though, so I put the bag down by the garage door. As I began taking my phone out to take a picture for the app, a man came around the right side of the garage. I looked over at him, and he just stood still, staring at me. The guy was really creeping me out, so I said, "It's right here for you, sir," as I pointed at the bag and slowly started walking away. Then he replied, telling me that this wasn't where he wanted me to drop it off. I turned around and noticed that he was still standing in the same spot. Sorry, where did you want me to put it?" I said, starting to get really uneasy about the situation. He pointed around the back of the garage and said that the door was over there. At that point, there was no way I was going to follow that guy to wherever he was trying to get me to go. I just kind of stood there for a moment, then said sorry and quickly walked back to my car. I looked over one more time before driving away, and the man was walking back behind the garage, but he left the bag of food. I got out of there and drove back to my dorm, shaking the whole way back. Something about that whole thing felt very off, and the fact that it was in a really nice neighborhood made me even more confused. The more I thought about it though, I realized just how strange it was that he needed to specify for me not to deliver to the main house, and that he refused to take the food unless I followed him to behind the garage. I'd never had to call the police before in my whole life, and I ended up not calling them this time either, as I really wasn't sure if maybe he was just some weird harmless guy. Anyways, it freaked me out for a few days, but eventually I got over it and continued doing deliveries in my spare time. Nothing else happened, though a couple weeks later I had another big order pop up on my app, and the area of delivery was the same. I obviously declined it, but I couldn't help but think about whoever ended up accepting that order and what happened to them during their delivery. It was the beginning of fall, and I worked as a cashier at a small store near my apartment. My usual shift ended at 9 p.m., and then I'd usually go do food deliveries for a couple of hours before heading home. I actually enjoyed doing deliveries at night, as the roads weren't busy, and most other delivery drivers would work during the day and would take all the orders, so I'd actually get more orders to do at night. Anyways, I had just gotten out of work and set up my app to get ready to do some deliveries. The first one that came in was quick, and only took about 15 minutes. Then I waited for a few minutes before the next order came in. It was a good payout, and the delivery address was 20 minutes away from where I was. I headed over to the fast food restaurant to pick up their food, then started making my way over to the house. The town I live in isn't too big and has a lot of empty plots of land. There's the main center of town, which is where my apartment is, and most of the restaurants. Then about 10 minutes out, there's a lot of farmland, and the houses are much more spread out. Almost all of the deliveries I get are within the town area, but every once in a while I'll get a delivery further out into the farm area. I assumed this was going to be a farmhouse since it was 20 minutes away. However, the app said that the address was located in a small neighborhood area just off of a small highway. I didn't like delivering to isolated farmhouses at night, as it just kind of creeped me out, so I was happy to be delivering to a neighborhood home. Once I got off the highway, I turned left and started making my way down the road toward the neighborhood. But almost immediately, I got a call from an unknown number. I declined it as I thought it was just a scam, but just a few seconds later they called again. Figuring it was probably the customer, I accepted it. "Hello?" I asked. A few seconds went by with no response, so I just hung up. But then again, just a few moments later, the same number called me. I answered, and almost immediately a guy speaks and tells me I turned the wrong way. I asked him what he meant, as I have the map up and it says that I'm going the right way, but he said his address gets messed up on the delivery app and that he always has to call and let the drivers know where to go. I said okay and asked him how to get there. He told me that when I got off the highway, I needed to take a right from that road, then take the third left. He mentioned it was a gravel path that led to his farmhouse at the end. I told him I'd be there in a few minutes and turned the car around. I've had multiple customers call me before to tell me that the address was a little off, or to give me directions on unnamed roads, as it was pretty common out here, so I honestly didn't think much of it. I passed the highway that I turned off of and continued until I found the third left and turned onto the gravel path. The path went into a small forest of trees and it was really dark. Again, I didn't like these areas at night, so I was definitely a little nervous driving down this isolated gravel road. Once I started getting nervous, I began thinking about how strange it was that the map had taken me so far in the opposite direction of the house that the man claims is his actual address. I tried to bury those thoughts, assuring myself that I was just overthinking it because I was nervous. A couple minutes passed though, and there was still no house in sight. At this point, I wasn't even sure if I had turned down the right path, but the trees were too close to the sides, so I didn't have much room to turn around anyways. I figured I'd continue down to the end, then call to ask if I had the right place, and turn around there if not. Another minute or two went by before I finally reached the end, as it merged into a small circle driveway next to a house. I drove up to the path that led to the front door and parked the car next to a for sale sign that was put up in the front of the house. Seeing that, I wasn't sure if I had the right house, but I looked over at the front door and it was open, and I could see someone further back wave at me. Figuring I was good, I grabbed the bag and started making my way over to the door. As I stepped onto the porch and began putting the bag down, I saw the man again down the hallway that led to the kitchen. He politely asked me if I could set the food down on the kitchen counter, then quickly walked away as if he was in a rush, and then I heard him turn the sink on in the kitchen. Hesitantly, I took a step into the house and looked around. It was decorated with old furniture and accessories, but it almost looked like it was completely unused. I quickly made my way down the hall and into the kitchen, but as soon as I got there, I noticed that the sink was still running, but the man was nowhere in sight. This made chills run down my body, and I quickly set the bag down on the counter and got out of there as quick as I could. I could hear the man yell something from the front door as I got back in my car, but I couldn't understand what he said. I put the car in drive and went back out the way I came. I didn't stop driving until I got to the parking lot of my apartment. Then I pulled my phone out and saw multiple missed calls from that same number. I blocked the number, then opened the delivery app so I could end my deliveries for the night. But that's when I noticed that I had messages from the customer through the app telling me that I had turned the wrong way and that I was at the wrong house. I went into shock for a moment, realizing that the man that had called me wasn't my actual customer, and the house I was in was just some stranger's house. I called the police immediately and reported everything to them. An officer came to my apartment to go over more details soon after. I had no idea how this man could have known that I was doing a delivery and had been able to see my location. The officer said that my phone had likely been hacked and that the man was probably monitoring everything that I was doing. Hearing this made me really uncomfortable. As if all of that wasn't bad enough, the next day I was informed that the house I was at was actually vacant, as it was for sale by the owners who had moved out months ago. The man had apparently gotten in through an unlocked window in one of the rooms. As of right now, they still haven't found anything significant that could lead to finding the man, which makes me feel really unsafe. I don't know for sure what the man was trying to do, but I think it's a pretty good assumption that he was probably planning on kidnapping me, or maybe even worse. I try not to think about it too much, but I can't help but go over all of the horrible things that could have happened on that night.
We all have our favorite holidays. For some, it's Christmas. For others, it's Thanksgiving. For me, it was Halloween, and was being the key word. Here's why it's not anymore. Back in 2019, I was finally financially ready to buy my own home. I was 27 years old at the time and was able to purchase a single-family property in the suburbs of Pennsylvania. At the time, I was single and living alone, but that didn't bother me. I thoroughly enjoyed my independence. It was Halloween night, my first Halloween in the new house. I had decorated it from top to bottom with lights, spiderwebs, gravestones, fog machines, and anything you could think of. The kids of the neighborhood loved my decorations. They came in flocks to trick or treat. Even their parents would come up to the porch and say what a great job I did. Anyway, I was sitting on my front porch, drinking hot apple cider. It was almost 10 p.m., and the trick-or-treaters had died down significantly. I was about to call it a night when I saw someone dressed in a scarecrow costume standing at the edge of my driveway. They had on makeup, hay, and even overalls, and looked like a very good scarecrow. They were standing there, staring directly at me and my house. I called out if he wanted any candy, because I was about to head in. The scarecrow did not respond. I waved my hands at them again, and asked if they wanted any candy before I locked up for the night. Still no answer from the scarecrow. At this point, I thought maybe this was some drunk teenager or someone strung out on drugs, and finally told them to leave and get off my property. The scarecrow tilted their head and walked away into the night. Later that same night, I locked up my house, ate the leftover Halloween candy, and put on a horror movie. It was past midnight when, from my living room where I was watching my movie, I could see my backyard floodlights going on and off. At first, this was not a concern. There's always small animals running around back there. But when the floodlights did not stop going off about 10 minutes after I noticed, that's when the situation changed. I got up, went to my kitchen back door, opened it, and looked out into my backyard. It was empty. No animals or anything in sight. I was about to chalk it up to faulty wiring when, in the back of my yard, my shed door was wide open. Now, I'm a man who is meticulous when it comes to locking up for the night. I would have never left my shed door open like this. In fact, I wasn't in it all week. I walked slowly towards the shed, wondering how on earth it had gotten opened, when the floodlights behind me shut off and I was immersed in total darkness. Not worried, because I was totally logical about the situation, thinking it could have been a gust of wind that had opened the door. I pulled out my lighter and stepped inside. I flicked it on. Everything seemed normal. The lawnmower was there. My toolkit on the shelf was there. Nothing was out of the ordinary. I did the mental checklist and was about to leave when I heard laughter. I held my lighter higher, praying that what I heard was just the wind blowing in the trees and not human laughter, because that had to be impossible since I was alone. But the impossible became possible. In the back corner, by the rakes, crouched down and still laughing, was that scarecrow. When the light hit his face, I could see his face paint was smeared, and he had this bizarre smile. I barely had time to process this when he stretched out his arms and charged at me. When I dropped my lighter, the scarecrow man slammed into me, and we started fighting right there on my shed floor. We were painfully rolling into other things in the shed because of how dark it was. I was trying to defend myself the best I could, while he kept laughing in this maniac way. And I was fearing for my life when, suddenly, the scarecrow stopped, got up from the fight, ran out of the shed, and into the night, still laughing. A little bruised, but okay. I did not end up calling the police. I honestly didn't feel like going through the headache of getting them involved. Instead, I double made sure my whole house was secured and locked. I stayed up on my couch, looking out the window, until I was finally too exhausted and fell asleep. My dream was hellishly real. It was of that scarecrow standing directly over me while I slept, laughing and staring into my soul. The next morning, when I woke up, I was glad to see the sunlight. What I was not glad to see was a bunch of hay by my couch. I tried not to freak out and tried to recall the scuffle and if any of the scarecrow's hay had gotten onto my clothes. I truly couldn't remember, but I pray that's the reason there was hay on my floor and not because my dream wasn't really a dream. Nothing like this has happened since. My girlfriend has now moved in with me, and we have never had such an encounter like we did my first Halloween night with the scarecrow. As much as I want Halloween to be my favorite holiday, I just can't anymore. It's too much trauma. But maybe one day that will change. But for now, I'm sticking with Christmas.
Our official merch store is finally here. If you want to support more of our channel, check out our merch shop. The link is in the description down below. See you on the next video.
My name is Julie, and I am a college student. I recently got a job at a local Dunkin' Donuts near my dorm. It's a 15-minute walk, so it's convenient since my car is pretty beat up. I can't trust it to run for more than a mile, and I'm saving up for my remaining year in education. The Dunkin' Donuts that I'm working at sits just off the campus, and to be honest, I'm not shocked that there are still students ordering donuts at midnight. Well, it's a donut and a coffee. Perfect combination, I must say. But the one that shocked me the most is almost at the end of every shift. We were throwing the leftover donuts away. It has always been their policy to never give away the remaining ones, and that it must be strictly be thrown in the garbage plastic bag at the end of the day. Some franchises allow their employees to take home leftover donuts, but in my case, my manager is pretty strict on implementing policies. We were instructed that whatever is left over, we would write numbers on a sheet to help the person who orders donuts know what is selling or not. And then they are thrown in the trash. It pains me to watch mouth-melting donuts thrown away, where it can be given to the homeless. It's a shame and a loss. One time, out of curiosity, I asked my manager about the wasted donuts. She raised an eyebrow and told me that it was because they didn't want to get sued if someone claimed that they ate it and got sick. So just like every late night, as my shift's coming to an end, we were throwing the remaining ones in a black plastic bag, sealing it tight since there would be homeless people that would go through the garbage, and place them at the trash area just near Dunkin' Donuts. If you ask me why I didn't even dare to take home at least one donut when we were throwing it out, it's because my manager is always watching us. It's pretty creepy, and it's not like I would grab a donut from a garbage bag. So like always, after me throwing them away, my manager would go through the bag. I'll clean the whole store and check the inventory for the next shift. One day when I was at my dorm sitting studying for my upcoming exams, my roommate, Emma, came home with a box of freshly made donuts. She told me that she had just started her small business and that she had personally made them. It smelled something familiar, but I doubt it was Dunkin', since it came in a different packaging and they had cute frosted design on top. I suppose working there made my nose smell Dunkin' Donuts all the time. Anyway, they smelled and looked great and I wouldn't mind tasting them. "Hey Julie, guess what?" came an ecstatic voice. "What?" I asked, looking over at Emma with an amused face. "I sold 8 boxes today. Too bad that there is still a box left, but I don't care," Emma said and placed a box of donuts at a table nearby and decided to eat it. I heard my stomach growl and looked at the clock. It was almost 8 p.m. and a couple more hours my night shift starts. I realized that I have not eaten dinner yet due to studying. "Here, you can eat with me. There's plenty more where that came from," Emma said, smiling, and I haven't been more grateful to have a roommate who is also a friend to share her food with me. So I indulged myself with a box of donuts. When it was time for work, I said goodbye to Emma and headed off to Dunkin'. Just like every night, I had to stand behind the register, check the inventory, clean off the tables, and mop the floor. It was a long night since there had been more customers than usual as there is an upcoming exam. After my shift as usual, we have to throw away the remaining ones again, but this time is different. My manager, who is always on the lookout, actually spits at the donuts. I was disgusted by what I saw. I mean, isn't it enough to just throw away the donuts? I really don't get why she would do that. She caught me staring and she stared back at me, shooting daggers as she said, "I'm just doing them a favor. I saw a homeless man go through the garbage yesterday night. I bet they would eat that." She smirked and left, not even sealing the freaking garbage bag. I was left speechless and stared at the donuts dumbfounded. I decided to pack them in a box and sealed it with tape, hoping that none of the homeless would go through it and eat the donuts with a spit on it. For several days, I did that until we ran out of boxes. Every day the manager would spit on the leftover donuts, which left me disgusted, but what can I do? I am just a regular employee. I cannot afford to lose my job as I badly need extra allowance for my studies. It's just disgusting that I want to throw up every single time I witness her horrible actions. Then one day, as I was leaving the store, I noticed someone at the trash area going through it and saw the open garbage bag filled with our leftover donuts. I ran as fast as I could, and when I caught the person, it was Emma. We both froze. I was completely stunned with what I just witnessed and found myself speechless. I glanced to what she was holding. She was placing the donuts in the box that she was selling. Not just that, she would put frosted designs to make it look like it was originally made by her. I felt my stomach turn upside down when I remember all the times she offered me those that she wasn't able to sell. That explains her recent situation when she wasn't able to make and sell donuts when I used to seal them in a box. I threw up by the times that I've eaten the freaking donuts, where my manager spit at, and whatever she was putting on it. Emma looked at me with shock on her face as well. After I was done, Emma explained to me why she was doing that, saying that she needs to pay for her school fees and that she saw people doing it on YouTube. I immediately left Dunkin' Donuts, moved to another dorm, and went to the doctor's. Since that day, I have never talked to Emma and never ate a donut again. My name is Louisa, and I'm now married in my late 20s. I fondly remember how I used to live alone and had little or no friends, while I lived most of my life on the internet. To give you an idea about me, I was a typical introvert teenager who has low self-esteem, and I don't put makeup on or apply any skincare. I see myself as a plain woman. Until one day, I was in search of a job and got accepted at Dunkin' Donut near my apartment. After a month working as a salesperson in day shift, an offer for a night shift showed up and I took the offer. Working night shift is an absolute advantage for me since there are only few customers, and it is not as busy as the day shift. I thought I was the only one putting in for the job, but little did I know that someone also took the night shift. His name is Jake, and he is the only guy among us. He was the first to approach me, and we've talked about a lot of random things. As our conversation goes, I discovered that we had a lot of similarities. I found out that he also likes watching anime. He's also a fan of my favorite band, and that he also binge watches my favorite Netflix series. I find it hard to make friends, since it is unlikely to find people who have the same interest as mine. That's why not long after we became friends, days passed by. I noticed that he seemed to have more empathy and got soft-spoken, like he was being too concerned for me. He usually likes to start the conversation and ask too personal questions, which makes me feel uncomfortable to answer. He'd even offer to buy me dinner sometimes, and other times he'd ask to walk me home, which I obviously refused. I see him as a friend, but I believe there are boundaries, especially he is a guy. Also, he doesn't talk too much about his background. I have no idea about him other than we're colleagues and our similar interests. He'd usually ask details about my life, but whenever I ask his, he'd change the topic. I just thought he's naturally an extrovert and being really friendly with me. I don't want to assume things. And like I said, I see myself as a plain woman that no guy would be interested in. But things started to get intense the day I gave him a listening ear, when he shared me his personal problems, which was unusual, I thought.
Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it.
Jake grinned while he mopped the floor next to me.
Well, payday is my bright day.
I made a joke which shouldn't require more than a giggle, but Jake burst out laughing hysterically.
So you stay alone?
This was the first question he asked, and I answered indifferently, as though it didn't matter.
Yes, I do.
I answered.
It must be tiring staying alone. Do you want me to live with you? You could save more money in that case.
Jake said, then gave a creepy smirk face.
What are you talking about? Please stop joking about that stuff again.
I answered and walked out on him to get busy elsewhere as I was starting to feel irritated. I could feel his bulging eyes glare at me as I left, and I had seen how energetic he was towards how I live, but I decided to think it was a harmless question. The next day, immediately we finished cleaning and everyone decided to rest in the locker room. I sat alone to stretch my back when he slipped into the bench next to me again, with our skin now making weird contact.
How do you sleep at night, Louisa?
He asked, and things started getting funny.
How everyone else sleeps, I guess.
I shifted on the bench and he did the same.
I don't think so. You made a post about your sleep routine yesterday on Facebook.
Jake grinned knowingly. My stomach dropped.
You follow me on Facebook?
I asked while keeping my composure, even though I am creeped out at this point, because I have never given my personal account to him or to anyone else at work.
Not really.
Jake smiled.
But you have a false home address on your Facebook profile. How did you know that?
I screamed in shock. I could feel my body shaking. But Jake's wide grin stayed.
I know where you live, Louisa. I saw you dancing into your house 2 days ago. Not only you followed my posts, but you've also followed me home.
I asked nervously.
Not really.
Jake scratched his scalp.
If I'm being honest, I am seriously freaking out right now. You're kidding, right?
I asked him, but he didn't say anything and still pulling a wide grin. Meanwhile, I remember weeks ago that there was a suspicious account that followed me on my Facebook.
Wait, are you stalking me? Is your name Juki on Facebook?
I faded, realizing the similarities in the name that I hadn't recognized.
I guess.
Jake placed his hand on my thighs, and I pushed him away reflectively and ran outside. I quickly called 911 and told them about my situation. Unfortunately, they told me they couldn't do anything about it unless he'd harm me physically. As disappointing as it sounds, I dropped the call and hurriedly went home. When I got home, I immediately searched for Jake's account. While searching, I have come to realize I knew that there was something odd about him. I find it sketchy that we had a lot of similarities. My favorite band, favorite series, favorite anime. It was all a fraud. The reason he knew these things about me is because he'd been stalking my social media accounts all these time. I also discovered that he was not just following me on my Facebook, but also on Instagram and Twitter. Fortunately, he uses the same username. It became easy for me to block them all. In the end, I decided to disable all my social media accounts. I'm glad I never trusted him. I'm just frustrated about the wasted energy I've given to him at work whenever we conversate. I knew I cannot stay any longer at my apartment, now that he knew where I live. I honestly never imagined myself in this situation, being a victim of creepy guys that stalk random women. I thought that being plain will save me from being their target. I was wrong. It is really not about how you dress or how you look. I messaged my manager that I quit my job and moved back to my parents the next day. Since then, I never went back to work at Dunkin' Donuts ever again. A few years ago, something happened that would change my life forever. I'm a male with a big body build. Most of the time, people are intimidated by my presence due to my physical appearance, but to the people who knew me, they know otherwise. In contrast to my intimidating presence, I always try to extend a hand to the people around me. That's how I was raised, and I'm glad. Even though sometimes they don't give back the same energy as me. I always say to myself that if no one does, no one would. I know it sounds heroic, but if one person could make a difference into someone else's life, let it be you. To begin with, I consider myself as a regular person, working from 9 to 5, making ends meet, and sometimes treating myself with a box of Dunkin' Donuts on the way home. I recently moved out of my parents' house and moved into an apartment complex near where I worked. It was a multiple-story apartment. It was quite decent than in the ones I recently visited. And as I was settling down, piling up boxes just outside my door, I noticed a kid who was looking at me. He looked thin and had a pale complexion. I said hi in my deep voice, but he ran away. Probably got scared, which is a common occurrence to me. I was confused at first, but quickly got over it as I needed to move the boxes piled out in the hallway. The apartment was spacious. A dedicated living room, dining, a small room for kitchen, and 2 bedrooms. I was elated. It was my dream to have a place for myself, and I finally had it, and I spent the day moving in. The next day after work, I decided to go to a local Dunkin' to order myself a box of donuts, specifically chocolate iced glazed with sprinkles, which is my favorite, and a cup of coffee. Once I got what I aimed for, I excitedly made my way home, thinking about the donuts I had purchased. As I was about to walk into my apartment, I noticed a kid looking over at me from a distance. I wonder if he lives just beside me, I thought. He was looking at the box of donuts I had in my hand, then I asked, "Do you want some?" He thought for a while, then slowly made his way over to me. "What's your name?" I asked as I opened the box. "You can choose what flavor you want," I said, hoping that he'll not choose my favorite. "Nathan," he said, and pointed at chocolate iced glazed with sprinkles. I was a little sad, but still I have 5 more left, so that should make up. I also noticed that there had been a bruise on his finger, the one that he pointed at. I was bewildered by what I saw. He looked normal on the outside other than he was thin. I suspect nothing strange. Where are your parents? I asked, hoping that it would not come off as prying. The kid looked at me after finishing the donut. They're working, he said, and as I was about to ask about the bruise, there's a lady and a guy calling out from the nearby hallway. I'm here, Nathan said and ran back. Days passed and I still think about that encounter. Every day I come home, Nathan would be there waiting. We would talk and laugh, and according to him, I became his best friend forever. I learned that his mom and dad were on a business trip and were away for weeks. That's why his babysitter was there taking care of him. But most of the time, I noticed that he was outside and that a certain guy goes over to their apartment. He also mentioned that the bruise on his finger was for the doctor to check, which he didn't know, and I don't want to ask more questions, since he gets down whenever we talk about the hospital and how he goes in and out of it. It left me wondering why. Hey, mister, he said one time. He sort of looks like thinking deeply. We were sitting here at the front of the apartment complex. It became our meeting spot after I came home from work. It's like a routine, and I don't mind Nathan's company. And he happens to like my favorite donut as well. So every time I ordered something off Dunkin' Donut, I always got us chocolate iced glazed with sprinkles. If I die, would you be there for me too? Nathan asked, and I was shocked. He looked at me with seriousness in his eyes. I was left dumbfounded by the question. He looks down and said, Mister, for a long time, you've been my only friend, and you give me donuts. I have no friends, and I guess they don't want to be my friends because I'm sick, he said, and I felt my heart ache. No kid should go through this, so I stood up and kneeled in front of him. I'll always be here for you. Those kids that don't want to be your friend, they don't know what they're missing out, I said, pointing at the box of donuts beside him, and he giggled. Best friends forever, right? There are days when Nathan doesn't show up, and when he does, we're having a blast. But there came a time when Nathan didn't really show up, and I haven't seen the babysitter as well. I started to get worried and decided to knock on their apartment, feeling my anxiety grow by the second. A man in his 30s, wearing a black suit, opened the door. He looked quite disheveled and seems like he hasn't slept for days. He looked similar to Nathan with his blue eyes. I'm guessing this is his dad. He looked at me warily. I proceeded introducing myself as their neighbor, who happens to be Nathan's friend as well, and that I was worried I haven't seen Nathan since. I felt my body grow cold when Nathan's dad responded with words.
He suddenly passed away.
He continued to explain that the doctor said it was because of diabetes, and that Nathan has a frail body and was born with it, so he had the carer give him a shot of insulin when needed. I felt my heart dropped. Tears came to my eyes, not knowing what to think. I felt like I am to be blamed for Nathan's demise. I had no idea he was suffering with diabetes, and I was so stupid to offer him donuts all these time. I kneeled in front of Nathan's dad and confessed to what I have done. Few days later, the police took me and interrogated me about the incident. I can't help but keep blaming myself for what happened, but I'm able to be released when they told me that the carer finally came forward, saying that she's the one to blame for Nathan's untimely death when she forgot to give Nathan's regular insulin shots. With tears in my eyes, I felt relieved, but at the same time blaming myself for giving Nathan some donuts. Then one time, Nathan's parents came and asked for forgiveness. I told them there is nothing to forgive. I can see how much they loved their son. They said they admitted their shortcomings and were too focused at work. They have neglected Nathan's condition. Soon after, I decided to move forward raising awareness for people, especially kids with diabetes. For Nathan, my best friend forever, may you rest in peace.